Picture this: penguins waddling across a wind-scrubbed beach at dawn, and lions asleep in hot yellow grass 1,000 kilometers north by dusk. Mountains older than almost anything still breathing. Empty red desert where the silence has weight, and a coastline where whales roll in close enough to hear their breath from the cliffs. South Africa has all of it, and today I'm going to show you the very best of it. Have you ever wondered which places in South Africa are truly worth your time? It's a big country, and a wildly varied one, and I know how easy it is to feel overwhelmed just trying to plan where to go. But you don't have to figure it out alone. I've got you covered. I'll show you the landscapes, the wildlife, and the places most visitors never even hear about. And stay with me until the end, where I'll take you to a mountain holding more plant species on its slopes than an entire European country, over 1,470 of them, and a cable car that spins its passengers a full 360 degrees on the way up. But before we get started, if you're excited to explore South Africa, subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments which place in South Africa you'd most like to visit. First, let's go through some fascinating fun facts about South Africa, and then we'll explore the best places this incredible country has to offer. Let's start with a puzzle. South Africa is the only country on Earth with 3 capital cities. Pretoria runs the executive, Cape Town holds parliament, and Bloemfontein keeps the courts. That awkward split dates to 1910, when 4 rival colonies merged and none would surrender the prize outright, so they carved it 3 ways. And here's something else born of not backing down. Mponeng Gold Mine, west of Johannesburg, is the deepest place humans have ever worked, its shafts reaching beyond 4 kilometers underground. Down there, the rock sits near 60 degrees Celsius, so crews pump slurry ice down the tunnels just to keep the air breathable. Now, have you ever wondered where the crown jewels came from? The Cullinan diamond, dug up near Pretoria in 1905, weighed 3,106 carats rough, the biggest gem-quality stone ever found. It was cut into 9 major stones, and the 2 largest sit in the British scepter and imperial state crown to this day. South Africa also does something no other country attempts with its constitution. It recognizes 12 official languages, having added South African Sign Language in 2023 to 11 spoken ones. No single tongue holds a majority, so the president routinely switches languages mid-speech to reach the room. Not everything remarkable here is modern. At Blombos Cave on the southern Cape Coast, archaeologists found a stone flake bearing a deliberate cross-hatched pattern drawn in red ochre. It's roughly 73,000 years old, which makes it the oldest known human drawing anywhere on the planet. Here's one for the medical history books. On the 3rd of December 1967, surgeon Christian Barnard performed the world's first human-to-human heart transplant at Groote Schuur Hospital in Cape Town. His patient, Louis Washkansky, lived 18 days, and the operation reshaped surgery worldwide overnight. And one last strange thing growing at the country's tip. The Cape Floristic region packs around 9,000 plant species into a sliver of land, roughly 70% of them found nowhere else. It's the smallest of the world's 6 floral kingdoms, yet crams in more variety per square kilometer than almost anywhere else alive. That's South Africa for you. A country that keeps the planet's oldest, deepest, and rarest things in places nobody thought to look. Let's begin high on the eastern edge of South Africa, where the land simply falls away. This canyon runs 26 kilometers, and it's carved 800 meters deep. Deep enough that you could stack more than 2 Table Mountains inside it and still have room to spare. The rock is red sandstone and quartzite, glowing rust in the late sun, and the whole gorge is green all the way down, one of the few great canyons on Earth that stays covered in forest and fern. You'll hear water somewhere below you, and cloud drifting up the walls in slow ribbons. Now look across to the 3-ronded peaks they call the 3 Rondavels. They're named for the round mud huts you see all over the country with their conical thatched roofs, and from the viewpoint, these 3 summits sit in a neat row like exactly that. 3 enormous stone huts facing the drop. But here's something you'd never guess from their smooth shape. At a place called Borksluk Potholes, swirling water has drilled perfect cylinders straight down into the rock, some of them meters deep, polished as smooth as a bowl. Have you ever seen water carve a hole so round it looks machined? The name comes from the gold rush of the 1870s, when prospectors swirled these very pools looking for the metal in their pans. And there's the spot they call God's Window, where the escarpment drops 700 meters to the Lowveld below. On a clear morning, you can see the flat bushveld stretching away toward Kruger and, on the sharpest days, all the way to the Mozambique border. Most of the time, though, cloud pours over the lip and hangs there, so you're standing on the edge of a wall of white with the whole world hidden beneath your feet. Come down off that escarpment and follow the land east, and it flattens into hot bushveld that runs on and on. This looks like open wilderness left untouched, but every hectare of it is managed, counted, patrolled. Kruger National Park covers nearly 2 million hectares, roughly the size of Wales, and it was proclaimed in 1926, grown out of a smaller game reserve that Paul Kruger set aside back in 1898. You'll drive for hours here and see the same low mopane trees, the same red dust rising behind you, the same knots of impala watching the road. It holds all of the Big Five, and around 1,500 lions move through this country. In the gray light before dawn, you'll hear them first. A low rolling call that carries for kilometers across the flats. Look closely at the water holes at that hour and you'll see the queue. Buffalo, elephant, zebra, all waiting their turn while the light comes up pale and gold. But the thing that truly shapes this park is something you won't see from your car. For years now, a quiet war has been fought over rhino horn, worth more by weight than gold, and poachers cross the fences at night to take it. So how do the rangers fight back? Anti-poaching units track them on foot, and in some areas they've taken the drastic step of dehorning the rhinos themselves, sedating the animal and sawing the horn off, so there's nothing left worth killing for. Picture that for a moment. A rhino standing in the bush with the very thing that defines it removed, so that it might live. That's the strange arithmetic of survival here, played out across a wilderness the size of a small country. Leave the bushveld behind and turn southwest toward the highveld, where the air thins and cools. In 1886, a prospector named George Harrison stumbled on an outcrop of gold-bearing rock, sold his claim for a handful of pounds, and vanished from the record, while the reef he'd found turned into the richest goldfield the world had ever seen. Within a few decades, a scrappy mining camp had become the wealthiest city in Africa. That's Johannesburg, sitting high on the highveld at 1,753 meters, where the light is sharp and the winter mornings bite. Now here's something you wouldn't expect from a mining town. Look down on the city from the air and you'll see green stretching in every direction. Millions of trees planted by people over more than a century, making one of the largest urban forests anywhere on Earth. In the old days, the streets were bare, the miners planted for shade and timber, and the canopy just kept growing. Ring all of that with the pale yellow mounds of mine tailings on the city's edge, and you have Johannesburg's true colors: gold, dust, and leaves. But the wealth was built on a brutal arithmetic, and nowhere shows it like Soweto. This sprawling township grew out of forced removals, where black workers were pushed to the city's margins. On the 16th of June 1976, thousands of schoolchildren marched there against being taught in Afrikaans, and police opened fire. Have you ever seen a single photograph change how the whole world saw a country? Walk those streets today, and you'll find that day marked on every corner. Head southeast off the highveld, and the ground begins to buckle upward into the foothills of the Blyde Mountains. The first thing you notice is the color of the light on the cliffs. Great walls of sandstone that turn deep ochre and burnt gold as the sun drops. The biggest of them is the Brandwag Buttress, a sheer sandstone face that looms over the road like the prow of a ship carved from honey. Come here in the last hour of daylight and you'll see why they named it Golden Gate. Now here's something the eye tells you before your legs do. This is high country. The park climbs toward 2,800 meters, and the air up on those grasslands is thin and cold and clean. Proclaimed in 1963, it covers about 340 square kilometers of the Eastern Free State, a stretch of rolling gold-green grass pinned between the cliffs and the sky. In winter, the tops go white with snow, and the sandstone glows all the warmer for the cold around it. But the rock itself holds a stranger story than the color. Look closely at those layers and you're reading the bed of a vast desert that lay here around 200 million years ago. So how do we know? Because the same sandstone across this region has given up dinosaur eggs and tiny embryos, some of the oldest ever found anywhere on Earth. Down on the grass beneath all that stone, you'll find black wildebeest wheeling in tight, twisting herds, eland moving slow and heavy, and zebra grazing in the open. Watch them scatter across the gold slopes with the ochre wall behind, and the whole scene seems lit from within. Keep climbing along that same spine of high country southward, and the land stops rolling and simply stands up. The Drakensberg Wall runs unbroken for 200 kilometers, a rampart of dark basalt that separates the interior from the sea. Its highest point, the Bana in Knysna, reaches 3,482 meters, the tallest peak anywhere in southern Africa. Stand at the foot of it and the mountain fills the whole sky, blue-gray in the morning, going gold and then violet as the afternoon storms build behind it. Now the piece everyone comes to see is a single curve of cliff called the amphitheater. Picture a wall of sheer rock 5 kilometers wide and a kilometer high, bending around you like the inside of a bowl. Off the top of it, the Tugela Falls drop about 948 meters in 5 separate leaps, one of the longest falls of water on Earth. In the dry cold of winter, the top tier freezes into a hanging column of ice. But the oldest thing here isn't the rock at all. It's what people painted on it. Have you ever wondered what those first artists were really trying to show you? In the sandstone caves below the basalt, the sand left tens of thousands of images, some of them thousands of years old, of a land and hunters and dancing figures. For a long time, everyone read these as simple pictures of the hunt. That turned out to be wrong. Many of them record the trances of sand healers, the eland, a sacred animal at the heart of their spiritual world. And here's what the scale does to you up close. The light shifts constantly against that dark stone, cloud pouring over the escarpment edge and vanishing. You'll hear almost nothing. Wind, a lone raven, water somewhere far below. Sit still a while, and the wall seems to lean out over you. Drive east off that cold escarpment until the air turns thick and warm and salt-smelling. Have you ever felt a city change the temperature of your skin the moment you arrive? Durban sits on the KwaZulu-Natal coast, right on the warm Indian Ocean, and it hits you like a wall of humidity. The Golden Mile runs for kilometers along the front. Wide promenades, palm trees, surfers waiting for the swell, the water bathwater warm even in winter. Now here's the thing you don't see from the beach. Just south of all that leisure sits the busiest port in the country and the largest container terminal in the whole southern hemisphere. Stand on the bluff above the harbor mouth and you'll watch enormous ships queuing out on the horizon, waiting their turn to slide through a gap barely wider than they are. But the deepest story in Durban isn't the port or the surf. It's the people. From 1860, the British shipped in indentured laborers from India to cut sugarcane along this coast, and many never went home. Today, Durban holds the largest population of Indian descent anywhere outside India itself. You'll taste it everywhere. In the bunny chow, a hollowed loaf of bread filled with curry, invented right here. And don't miss what's out in the water you can't see. Since 1952, shark nets have been strung along these beaches, hundreds of meters offshore, quietly keeping the bathers and the great whites apart. Swim out past the breakers, and that warm ocean feels like the friendliest thing on earth. Turn inland now, away from the coast, up onto the great dry plateau of the Karoo. There's an old line about this town, that the river had to bend all the way around it. Graaff-Reinet sits in a near-perfect horseshoe of the Sundays River in the Eastern Cape, and the water loops so completely that the town is almost an island held in one long curve. It's the fourth oldest town in South Africa, founded in 1786, and you can still walk streets lined with flat-roofed Cape Dutch houses, white walls glaring in the sun, the flat scribblands stretching brown and gray to the horizon behind them. Now here's something you wouldn't guess from those quiet church steeples. In 1795, the townsfolk grew so tired of the Dutch East India Company that they threw out the local magistrate and declared themselves an independent republic. It lasted only a matter of months. But for that brief spell, this dusty settlement on the edge of nowhere ran itself. But the thing that will stop you is above the town, not in it. Drive up into the Kamdaboo National Park, which wraps around Graaff-Reinet almost completely, and you come to the Valley of Desolation. Have you ever stood at the lip of a cliff and looked down on stone pillars taller than a skyscraper? These dolerite columns rise as much as 120 meters straight out of the valley floor, split and stacked by 100 million years of slow erosion. In the late afternoon, they burn a deep rust red, and the only sound is the wind and, sometimes, a klipspringer clattering across the rock below you. Down off the plateau, the road drops back toward the sea, and the brown gives way to deep green. Somewhere in that green, a woman spends her mornings wading knee-deep in a lagoon, lifting handfuls of seagrass to count the creatures clinging to it. What she's looking for is smaller than your thumb, and it lives nowhere else on Earth. This is Knysna on the Garden Route in the Western Cape, wrapped around a wide tidal lagoon where the forest comes almost down to the water. The seahorse she's counting is Hippocampus capensis, found only in this estuary and two others just along the coast. So why is it here and nowhere else? Because it needs still, sheltered brackish water, and this quiet lagoon is one of the last places calm enough to hold it. But that calm hides a hard edge. Where the lagoon meets the open ocean, it does so through a narrow gap between two sandstone cliffs called the Heads. The current runs fast and unpredictable through that gap, and for years the harbor was declared unsafe for shipping altogether. Stand at the top and you'll see the swell fold and churn where the tide fights the sea. Now here's the part that will stay with you. In the forests behind the town once roamed a herd of elephants, the last truly wild, free-roaming elephants left in South Africa. For decades their number fell, and fell again, until surveys suggested perhaps a single animal remained, moving alone through the tall yellow woods. You won't see her from the road, and you likely won't see her at all. She's out there somewhere in that green, in the quiet, walking the same paths her herd walked 100 years ago, the last of a line that once thundered through the whole Cape. A short drive east along the coast, the forest opens and the land runs out into the sea. What hits you first is the smell. Salt and kelp and downwind, the thick musk of thousands of seals packed onto the rocks below. You hear them long before you see them, a low chorus of barks rolling up the cliff face. This is Robberg, a rocky peninsula that pushes about 4 kilometers straight into the Indian Ocean near Plettenberg Bay. It became a reserve in 1979, and the path around it climbs to a headland 148 meters above the water. Look down from there and you'll spot the Cape Fur Seal colony, dark bodies sliding through the surf, hundreds hauled out on the whetstone. In winter, southern right whales cruise the bay below and dolphins run the line where the swell breaks. But before the seals and the whales, people were here. And I mean a very long time before. Tucked into the peninsula is Nelson Bay Cave, and the layers of ash and shell and bone inside it record human life going back more than 100,000 years. Have you ever stood somewhere people have sheltered for that long? Those early people watched the sea rise and fall, watched the coastline move kilometers in and out as the ice ages came and went. Don't miss the moment the trail drops to a narrow sand spit with heaving ocean on both sides at once. Waves break left, waves break right, and you're walking the thin line between them. Carry on west around the coast, and the cliffs draw close to a town that owes its whole reputation to something it once killed. Because Hermanus, sitting on the edge of Walker Bay in the Western Cape, made its living from whaling, and now it makes its living from the whales being alive. Between June and November, southern right whales swim into this bay to calve, and they come so close to the cliff path you can hear them breathe. Great darkbacks roll in the green water, calves nudging alongside, tails lifting into the wind just meters below your feet. Now here's something you won't find in many towns. Hermanus employs a whale crier, a man who walks the shorefront with a horn made of dried kelp, blowing coded blasts to tell you where the whales have surfaced. Listen for it, and you'll learn to read him. A pattern of notes for the old harbor, another for the lagoon. So how did they come back? Because for years, they very nearly didn't. These are called right whales for a grim reason. Slow, fat with blubber, floating when dead, they were the right ones to hunt. And by the time whaling here ended in 1935, the population was a shadow of what it had been. Recovery has been slow decade after decade, and the animals crowding the bay each winter are the great-grandchildren of the few that survived. Don't miss the 12-kilometer cliff path that runs the whole shoreline, threading past fynbos and rock pools and little benches worn smooth. You walk it with the swell hiving below, and every so often the crier's horn sounds again, and everyone stops and turns toward the water. Away from the salt air, the road turns inland and climbs into a valley where the whole town smells of oak leaves and crushed grapes. They call Stellenbosch the Eikestad, the city of oaks. And the moment you arrive, you understand why. Great oaks lean over every street, planted centuries ago, their roots buckling the pavements and their shade falling across whitewashed gabled houses that look almost too neat to be real. This is the second oldest town in South Africa, founded in 1679, sitting in a bowl of mountains in the Western Cape. But the vineyards here owe their existence to a wave of refugees. After 1688, French Huguenots fleeing persecution arrived with almost nothing except a knowledge of wine, and they planted the first serious vines on these slopes. Look closely at the wine labels around town and you'll still see their surnames, French names spoken now with an Afrikaans turn 3 centuries on. So why do the grapes grow so well right here? Because of the valley rising behind the town. Jonkershoek is a steep green cleft in the mountains, and the water running off those peaks feeds the vines below with cold, clean mountain flow. In summer, the same valley fills with trail runners grinding up brutal endurance routes, thousands of meters of climbing in a single day. Wander the oak streets in the late afternoon, and the light turns everything gold and heavy. Students cycle past on their way to lectures, a dog sleeps in a doorway, and somewhere a cellar door swings open. Beyond the oak-shaded valley, the road runs south past the last of the vineyards until the peninsula narrows to a thin finger of rock reaching into cold water. In 1488, a Portuguese captain named Bartolomeu Dias sailed around this very headland, the first European to do it, driven so far by storms he barely realized he had rounded the tip of a continent. He named the storms first, then the hope. For now the sea route to the riches of the Indies lay open. At the edge here you'll feel the fear those sailors carried. The cliffs fall away to gray water that never stops moving. But this is not, whatever you may have been told, the southernmost point of Africa. What makes it matter is what happens in the sea below you. Two great ocean currents meet near here. The cold Benguela sweeping up the west, the warmer Agulhas coming down the east. And where they interact, the water churns and turns dark. That collision drives the wind, the fog, and the confused seas that wrecked ship after ship for centuries. Now here's something the builders got wrong. Look up and you'll see the first lighthouse placed high on the point at 238 meters, so its beam would carry far out to sea. Have you ever seen a light so high it becomes useless? That's what happened. The cloud rolled in and swallowed it whole, and vessels kept breaking apart on the rocks below, blind to the warning above them. So in 1919, they built a second, lower light closer to the water where sailors could actually see it. Look down at the surf, and you'll sense the wreck still resting there, quiet under the cold current. North along the peninsula, the city gathers itself against the mountain. 7 kilometers offshore in Table Bay sits a low-grey island you can see from the waterfront, Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela spent 18 of the 27 years he was imprisoned. You can look straight across that stretch of water and understand exactly what it did to a man to be held there. Cape Town lay in full view the whole time, close enough to see, impossible to reach. But before we climb the mountain behind it, sit with what that island was. In a small limestone quarry, prisoners broke rock for years, and the glare off the white stone damaged Mandela's eyesight for good. The cell measured barely 2 meters across, with a mat on a concrete floor. And through the bars, always, that same view of the city that would not have him. Now lift your eyes to the flat top above the harbor. That plateau is old, almost beyond imagining. 260-million-year-old sandstone laid down and lifted and worn flat while continents drifted apart beneath it. Since 1929, a cableway has hauled people to the summit, and since 1997, the cars turn slowly as they rise, so you see the whole bay wheel below you. Have you ever stood on something older than the dinosaurs and watched a city breathe underneath it? And here's the thing that catches strangers off guard. In summer, a hard southeasterly wind comes tearing across the peninsula. Locals call it the Cape Doctor because it scours the air clean. When it hits the mountain's edge, it lays down a thick blanket of cloud that pours over the rim like spilt milk and stops halfway down. They call it the tablecloth. You'll watch it form in minutes, and the whole flat summit disappears. "200 kilometers north of the mountain, the city thins out and the land goes red and quiet. The heat comes off the rock in the afternoon, dry and still, and you can hear your own boots on the sand. Up here, the sandstone has been carved into shapes that stop you where you stand. The Maltese Cross, a single pillar of stone rising 30 meters out of nothing, and the Wolfberg Arch, a smooth span of rock framing empty sky. Wind and water did all of it, grain by grain, over hundreds of millions of years. But the strangeness of the Cederberg isn't only in the rock. This narrow range, declared a wilderness zone in 1973, is the only place on Earth where rooibos tea will grow. Have you ever wondered why a plant refuses to live anywhere else? It needs this exact soil, this dry heat, these acidic sandy slopes, and outside this small stretch of the Western Cape it simply won't take. Every cup of red bush tea drunk anywhere in the world came from these hills. Now look higher, past the tea fields to the peaks. Sneekhop climbs above 2,000 meters, and its name means snow peak, because in winter, in a country most people picture as endlessly warm, snow dusts these summits white. You'll feel the temperature drop as you climb toward them, the red rock giving way to cold, clean air. Don't miss the light at dusk, when the whole range glows rust and orange before the dark comes down hard and fast. South and west now, down off the high country, until the road runs out at the sea and one great flat rock fills the whole sky. And now, the place I promised you at the very beginning. Have you ever seen a mountain with its top sliced clean off, standing over a city like a table set for giants? That's what rises above Cape Town. 1,086 meters of sheer sandstone, its summit stretching nearly 3 kilometers from end to end, so level you could walk it like a road. Now here's how you get up there. A cableway has climbed this rock since 1929, rebuilt in 1997, and each car carries 65 people while turning a full circle as it rises. 5 slow minutes, and the whole city, the harbor, the 2 oceans spin past your window one after another. But before we talk about the age of it, look at what grows on the slopes. Over 1,470 plant species cling to this one mountain, more than you'll find in all of Britain. It's called fynbos, low and wiry and tough, and much of it lives here and nowhere else on the planet. And here's the truth that hides in that flat summit. Everyone looks at this rock and sees a mountain, but you're looking at something far stranger and far older. This sandstone was laid down as a seabed, then pressed into the floor of a supercontinent, and it's been standing for around 260 million years. Older than the Alps, older than the Himalayas, older than the dinosaurs that came and went while it simply waited. The Alps are children beside it. Stand up there at dusk with the cloud pouring over the edge like slow white water, and you're standing on the oldest thing you'll ever touch. Standing on rock that old puts the rest of the trip in perspective, and that's the note I wanted to leave you on. If South Africa's on your list now, subscribe for more of these journeys and drop a comment with the place you'd visit first.